Yeah, if you're seeing my face for the first time, my name is Lucy. You're welcome. Yeah, I'm here for people who are coming from Africa or from other parts of the world. Going to abroad is a big deal sometimes. But imagine your dream of traveling abroad for a better life. All turns into a nightmare. Just because of one wrong move. It might be intentional move or not, but it landed into the death row or into death sentence. And what do you think? You know, a lot of these things come up most times. We see most of African youths languishing in foreign jails because of one thing or the other. Let's look at the case of Stephen Munyako and Margaret Nduta. Both are Kenyan nationals who were convicted separately. Stephen Munyako is convicted in Saudi Arabia for unaliving a Yemeni colleague, and Margaret Nduta is on death row in Vietnam for drug smuggling. These two people are both Kenyan nationals, right? But we have so many of these cases. This is the ones that have come to light. Our young or youths, African youths in all parts of foreign prisons. You see, this is Stephen Munyago, who traveled to Saudi Arabia in his early 20s to work. While at his workplace, he had a dispute with his colleague, a Yemeni Saleh, which resulted into fights and the wounds or injuries sustained by the Yemeni man, Stephen's colleague. It did not end well, and the man died. Stephen was sentenced for his death in 2011, but again, there was an appeal by the family of the man, which was set to overturn Stephen's sentence in the Sharia court, and thereby getting Stephen a death sentence. But for the sake of the deceased's youngest son to come of age to give his consent according to the Sharia law, that was what caused Stephen not to be executed by beheading in Saudi Arabia. It kept Stephen going until 2024, when negotiations and pleas for his release started for $1 million. I guess life giving him a second chance. Ambassador of Saudi Arabia to Kenya was asked by the Kenyan government, to intercede on behalf of Stephen's case, and reaching out to the family of the deceased, they accepted to collect money called diya under the Islamic law. It's a kind of ransom you pay for any damage you cause to people, maybe to property, even to murder, like this case of Stephen murdering someone. So a sum of $1 million was paid to the family of Saleh in exchange for Stephen's life. Luckily for him, the family of Saleh is accepting the ransom. The fact that the Kenyan government intervened and the ambassador of Saudi Arabia to Kenya also spoke to his country or spoke to the Saudi government and secured the release of this man, which just happened in March 26th. What would have been the fate of this man? So you can see some of these things is an eye opener that in most countries there are some laws you don't even fall into. There are some deeds you shouldn't even think of. So on to the next one is Margaret Iduta, who was convicted in Vietnam. Margaret left Kenya to Vietnam, also for search of greener pastures. As she got to Ho Chi Minh City, she was apprehended by the officials of Vietnam, and some of these countries had zero tolerance for drug trafficking. For the possession of 2 kilograms of cocaine. According to the resources or the news that we hear from Kenya, it is said that the people that are responsible for this girls ordeal in Vietnam has been apprehended too in Kenya. So you can see, but let us look at some of the countries that has zero tolerance for drug trafficking. So we have them here: Malaysia, Vietnam, China, Philippines, Singapore, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, Bahrain, Kuwait, and United Arab Emirates. These countries has zero tolerance for drug trafficking. So for you that wants to leave your country from Africa to go to these countries, do not think of drugs. Well, it's not an advice, but you should know that anything can happen to you. You can be unalived in foreign prisons. They treat you more harshly, especially when you do drugs. So places like Vietnam, during execution, they kill you with lethal injection. Indonesia is firing squad. Singapore is by hanging. Also, I think same thing with China. So freedom is priceless. The overcrowding and the psychological effects these prisons causes on individuals before even execution or before being unalived is something that has to be looked at. These countries and many more other countries has zero. Thankfully, these two cases I mentioned, Stephen and Margaret, there is hope for them because their government is actually appealing to the government of Saudi Arabia, or has appealed to the government of Saudi Arabia and the government of Vietnam, not like it's under compulsion, but a kind of diplomatic negotiations to see if they can secure a release for Margaret Nduta. Yeah, we're still on Kenya. Kenya is the new dumping ground for second-hand clothing, overtaking Nigeria, which used to be the first importation of second-hand clothing all over Africa, or in the whole of Africa. Yeah, the industry of second-hand clothing is huge and is booming in Kenya. Imagine championing over Nigeria in importation of second-hand clothing. Nigeria, that is 4 times bigger than Kenya, imports more second-hand clothing than Nigeria. In Nigeria, second-hand clothing is popularly known as Oke or Okrika. No, it's while in Kenya it's called Mitumba. It has overtaken Nigeria that has a population of over 200 million people. So what this literally means is that Kenyans wear second-hand clothing known as Mitumba. They wear it to church, they wear it to mosque, they wear it to businesses, they wear it to offices, they wear it to wherever, even to the kitchen, even to sleep. That is what it means, because if they can import over or and above Nigeria, what happens to our local textile industry or to the textile manufacturing industry? I'm trying to picture what it would be like in Kenya. Comparing Nigeria, that is 4 times bigger. If Kenya has imported more mitumba or second-hand clothes more than Nigeria, which means the textile industry in Kenya is almost dead or is collapsed. Because you can see that a lot of things that happens in Africa, African countries like taking the easiest route, importing second-hand clothing. Imagine a country importing used clothes from other parts of the world, from Asia, America, importing it more than the textile industries they have. They don't use the materials they made from their country. They prefer buying second-hand clothing. Well, while it might still be okay to import second-hand clothing, which is very helpful for the poorer people and for the less privileged or the needy in the society, but it affects more of your economy. It affects the economy of your country. So from 2022 to 2024, Kenya has imported over $800 million worth of second-hand clothing. I'm not talking about Kenyan shillings, I'm talking about US dollars. While Mutumbu or second-hand clothing provides lots of market business opportunities for people, because according to statistics, it has provided over 2 million jobs to Kenyans. And it might be the same case with Nigeria. But let's ask ourselves this: how many new clothing does Africa export to other parts of the world? And stock less of second-hand clothing. You see, this is in the mind. Picking second-hand clothes is worth over 800 million US dollars into Africa under 2 years, into just one particular country in Africa. It stifles the local industries, local textile industries that should be thriving well. Because I know that most of the times when you prepare to go out with mitumba or second-hand clothing, you look second-hand too. Sometimes it looks so ugly. And it turns out that if you don't pick right when making your choice in this mitumba or second-hand clothing, or end up buying agenda. Nigerian language, they call it agenda. I end up buying rubbish, rags. So let's think about this. Is it really worth buying? The perception also that locally made clothes are not good enough. I've seen some women wearing sari, Indian sari. But you ask yourself, can an Indian wear an African Ankara or locally made waxes from Nigeria or from Ghana, from Kenya? But you will see an African woman wearing Indian sari that came from second-hand clothing. I don't understand that mindset. Well, my final take on this: while second-hand clothing provides good business opportunities for people and also affordable clothing for, let's look at it this way: there is need for balance, because the local industries are suffering, so it should be considered, and also the health concerns that comes with wearing second-hand clothing, especially underwears. There's a big risk wearing that. Let's look beyond Africa. The other countries are also topmost in importation of second-hand clothes. Countries like Pakistan, United Arab Emirates, Guatemala, that South American country, are also top. In fact, these 3 countries outside of African continent are the major buyers of second-hand clothing. But I'm just talking about how it impacts African economy. I'm tailoring this to. If you've watched this one, thank you for stopping by. Please leave a comment in the comment sections, like and subscribe. See you next time.